Yeah, when 40 billion of Treasury bills are sold like they were last week, 7-day Treasury bills, at a yield of 1/20th of 1%, that means the whole country is basically at the point virtually, or a lot of the country is at the point of putting their money under the mattress. I mean, you're only 1/20th of 1% away from where it's better to put it under the mattress. You don't want 300 million Americans putting their money under the mattress. I mean, this economy doesn't work well without the lubrication of credit and trust, and that's been lost, and it's a huge problem. What you have is you have the major institutions of the world all wanting to deleverage. They want to take down their assets and liabilities. They want to, what seemed so easy to borrow against a year ago, now it looks like rat poison to them. So they're trying to deleverage. There's only one institution in the world that can leverage up in a way that's at all a countervailing force to that. That's the United States Treasury.
That was the legendary investor Warren Buffett, recently interviewed on PBS by Charlie Rose. Now, 2 weeks ago, we looked back at the Great Depression to figure out why it happened, and by so doing, appreciate why it continues to haunt governments and economists to this day. Now, tonight, we're going to look at what's happening in the global economy, not in terms of the specific failures of big banks and corporations, even though that's hogging the headlines, but rather to get a grip on the big words being thrown about by the pundits and news anchors. The news will change from day to day, but the key concepts will remain. It's Financial Vocabulary Night on The Explainer, and I'm Manolo Quezon. This is The Explainer, where we explain why issues are issues. Now, our explainee tonight is Yu-Shin Chuang, who's on a working fellowship here from New York University. And you've seen her on the show before, so welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay, and we're also joined in our studio audience by industrial economics students from the University of Asia and the Pacific. Welcome to the show. Now, Yu-Shin, would you like to invite our TV audience to be doing what our guests from UANP will be doing, which is to weigh in with their opinions and questions?
Of course. Text react space X space your name and your question or reaction and send it to 2366 for Globe and Sun and 231 for Smart. Or you can log on to www.the-explainer.com.
So more on the financial crisis and what the words being bandied about are when we return. For the past few weeks, fear and awe have gripped all kinds of people, from filthy rich financiers to ordinary blue-collar workers, because of how the American economy, in the words of Warren Buffett, has ended up like a world-class athlete suddenly struck down by a heart attack. Now, tonight, we're going to do things a little differently around here. We've been riveted by the news, but every time you see a talking head on TV or read their statements in the papers, there are certain words and concepts that keep cropping up. Now, when the U.S. House of Representatives passed a bailout package last week, it came after a week of furious debate and agonizing on the part of American politicians. As they tried to decide what to do, their phones rang like crazy, emails flooded in, and that was just from their voters. For the rest of us, we were riveted by the sight of stock markets seesawing based on raw emotion, it seemed, swinging widely from relief to despair, depending on how the American congressional wind seemed to be blowing. Tonight, we have someone who will help us get a grips on what that wind is, and that's Professor Vic Abola, Professor of Economics at the University of Asia and the Pacific, and we've asked him to help you and me come to terms with some key terms. Professor, have a seat while we go over what these words are. Yes. Now, these words are something familiar to economics students like the ones here in our audience, but perhaps to you and me who don't have as much of a background in these things, they're kind of fearsome words. So what are they? They are derivatives, risk, leverage, liquidity, and the pretty basic word, trust. Now, if you saw the first clip we showed of Warren Buffett, that gives us the word that we're going to start with. We're starting with the last one, trust. because it's something that Warren Buffett talked about in the clip which we started with. So without further ado, let's ask you, Professor, to explain to us why trust seems to be such a crucial word at this point when talking about the financial markets.
Well, because in the financial system, you are putting your money with another. And therefore, that has to be founded on trust, that it's going to go back to you when you need it, no? Or at least when you agree for it to be given back to you.
Okay, now if we go over what the news has been over the past few weeks and months and even the past year, what we've been seeing are very famous, respected, successful institutions built on trust, built on their track record and holding large sums of money for investors and growing that and increasing the value of that money, suddenly keeling over, going bankrupt or having to be nationalized by the United States government. And now we've been seeing in governments from Iceland to Germany to the United Kingdom. What happened? Why is it all of a sudden that these people, who some of them have, these institutions, some of them having close to a century of existence, suddenly seem to have lost all the trust and ceased functioning?
Well, because some of them had invested in assets that didn't turn out to be very good. So, and when some of them failed, the other remaining institutions started questioning the health of those who were remaining. So they were not lending to one another, and so you have the distrust there, the lack of confidence among the players in the financial system.
Okay, let's go on to the other word, the first of our list, which is derivatives. Now, if we were looking at the whole genesis of this crisis, it began with the American housing market offering basically to millions of Americans home loans that under normal circumstances they would not be entitled to get. And then what happened was, so they started giving out these home loans. People started getting houses. In some cases, they didn't read the fine print, which is that since we're giving it to you at practically no interest or at very good terms, we still reserve the right to suddenly raise the interest later on. Now, along the way, they've been saying that what happened with the banks and other financial institutions is they started getting these loans and then coming up with fancy ways to start selling them to each other and borrowing in turn on these things, and they started being called derivatives, which was a pretty exotic concept. Can you walk us through what this whole thing is?
Well, derivatives, we're running a seminar on derivatives tomorrow in UAP, but I don't know, by coincidence, you've asked me about this because it's fairly much based on the idea that, normally what we have as an asset is straightforward. No? You say, I have a savings account passbook. Okay. That means my money is with the bank, and to the extent that there's an amount there that says that my balance, I can go and get that money from the bank. Right? Now, a derivative works somehow differently, in which it's just a piece of paper which has normally has a backing, an asset backing.
Okay, so if, in this case, for example, if I got a house, even on a housing plan, my asset is the house.
That's correct.
And for the bank that gave the loan, what backs the loan in case I default and don't pay my housing loan is the bank can get back the house and cover its loan. So you're saying beyond that fairly straightforward transaction,
yes,
it will then become yet another transaction?
Yes, another transaction could be made from that because that's an asset from the bank side. It's a receivable from you. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to pay the bank so much periodically, and that that is an asset for the bank. Then what it does is it could issue derivatives based on this.
Me being the bank.
The bank, yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
So basically I can say, look, there's this guy who has a mortgage